Welcome to the Counseling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counseling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm well, thank you very much for asking, Rory, and we hope that you are well too. You've joined us for episode 189 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. 3 topics we're going to be diving in today, starting off with our student check-in, where we kind of try to find a topic that relates to a student's journey. And today we're going to be looking at the thick history of CBT. So that's a real theory base there for you. Then we go into the digital counselling revolution, where we recognise that technology now forms a part of how therapy is consumed by our clients and delivered by therapists. And today we're going to be looking at selecting the correct equipment for working online. And then we pop our toe into the pool that we call Practice Matters, where today, Rory, you did an interview on how parents can help their child's mental health. Can you kind of give us a bit of a flavour of what we can expect from that?
Yes, I spoke to Dr. Rosanna Capalla-Hodge, an American psychotherapist who specialises in working with children and families, and she shared some really interesting insights into how parents can help the children, maybe of use for those people who are counselling children. And the parents ask, is there anything we can do in between the sessions? Really, really incisive insights.
I'm looking forward to that because I think I might take something away there. I've got a daughter, you see, so I'm looking to learn something from that. But we kick off today speaking about the history of CBT, or cognitive behavioural therapy. Over to you, Rory. You are the guy who knows about the theories.
Yeah, well, let's go back in time. Let's get in that time machine and go back around 2,000 years to Zeno of Citium, a Greek philosopher who was a Stoic, and Stoics basically were philosophers who kind of said, and I'm paraphrasing, life is hard and really you have to put up with it. And he suggested that negative emotions were generated by negative thinking. And there's an old adage in CBT that how we think influences how we feel influences how we behave, and how we behave, of course, influences our life. So the history of CBT really starts with Greek philosophers, and then as we move forward, we move to Marcus Aurelius, and he was a Stoic person, and he said very little is needed to make life happy. It's all within your way of thinking. And during the kind of early part of the 20th century, Stoicism was used as a basis for Albert Ellis, who developed rational emotive behavioral therapy. He was really the founder of CBT, and he used to struggle with his own kind of irrational thinking. And there's a story about Ellis's early life where he was trying to find himself a girlfriend, one presumes. And he was kind of struggling. He was very shy talking to women. So he went to a park and he decided to speak to 100 women, in which case he would then cure himself of this kind of irrational fear of being frightened of talking to women. And that formed roughly the basis of his philosophy, REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. And that was the founding of CBT in a way. It was the ground of CBT. And then he went on to develop the ABCDE model, which was action, belief, consequence, decision, and then disputing this decision. So that forms the basis of CBT. And of course, then we see it moves on to Aaron Beck and the theory we have today. But it all started, Ken, with the Greek philosophers. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I guess that human nature is human nature. We've been studying it since consciousness, so it's no wonder that it does date back there. And as you quite rightly say, Rory, a rich history, but the actual CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy as we know it, with its name, cognitive behavioral therapy, is accredited to Aaron Beck, of course. And what's interesting to me is it was only came about in the 1960s. I was born in the 1960s, so kind of maybe somewhere in my lifetime. I'm not sure when in the 1960s, but it seems relatively new when I look at it. I'm sure many listening to this may think that that's really old and dinosaur-y, but for me it doesn't seem that far away. And the base of CBT works on situation, thoughts, feelings and behaviors. So an example of this is a situation, something happens to a person, like they don't hear from their best friend for a long time, and it's longer than usual. Normally they would hear from them. So that's the situation that we're outlining here. So it goes situation, then on to thoughts. So the person then thinks, and they think, I wonder why I haven't heard from them. And then to interpret the situation, and they think maybe that friend doesn't like me anymore. So they're basically creating an irrational thought or an irrational belief. And then the feelings come. So we've gone situation, we've done thoughts, now we look at feelings. And the feelings may be that the person now feels upset, and they may feel anger towards the person who hasn't contacted them. And then the final part of CBT is it results in a behavior. And that's why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, because the behavior is the acting out on all of this that's happening internally. And the person may have an argument with their friend, or fall out with their friend, or vow never to speak with them again. And that is the actual behavior. But if you look at that behavior, it is rooted in a faulty belief that came from the situation. The situation, the friend didn't contact them. Maybe they went away. Maybe they went on holiday and forgot to tell them. We don't know. But the thought then goes into the feelings, which creates that belief, the faulty belief, and acted out in a behavior.
Yes, I think it's interesting because sometimes CBT gets a bit of a bad press. It's considered not phenomenological. In other words, as opposed to accepting someone's experience, you're kind of challenging them to look at their experience in a different way. CBT is all about someone coming to you and saying, this is the experience I've had. And the therapist very gently say, well, why don't you check that out in reality? And as you've quite rightly, outlined, Ken, you've not seen your friend for a little while, therefore they've fallen out with me. Well, where's your evidence to that? And I think it's a very useful therapy. It is very effective. And one fun fact of CBT, it was designed to be measured. A lot of other therapies were never had a measurement design built in, but CBT has. And that is why it's seen as the therapy of choice for the National Health Service, because you can measure it. You could ask clients to score, 1 to 10, how they're feeling, and they can self-score and see their progress through the arc of the therapy. I want to go back a little bit to Albert Ellis, because Albert Ellis's theory was slightly different. He saw an activating event. So, for example, you might crash your car. Then that leads to a belief system that leads to think you're a bad driver. Consequences are you stop driving because you feel you're no good at driving and you're going to crash again, and all these irrational thoughts. And then there's the kind of disputing. So when someone goes to a therapist, the therapist would actively dispute. And that's the biggest difference between, I think, CBT and REBT. Ellis was a real disputer of people's irrational beliefs. And for those of us who've heard recordings, you can find them on YouTube. Sometimes he swears and rants at his clients. That's not a position that I would recommend, by the way. As he tries to get across that, is their belief of the world actually the real one? And then he would dispute it. And then eventually there'd be effects. And that's the point where someone would be revising their beliefs. And it's known as cognitive restructuring. But it is a very, very effective therapy, and one that's being developed all the time. It's didn't just stop with Aaron Beck. It's being developed. So now we have third wave CBT, which kind of amalgamates person-centered approach, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's more of a holistic approach, but certainly an approach that stands the test of time, Ken.
Yeah, it is, and it's effective. And it's interesting when we think about these irrational beliefs, as Albert Ellis might say it, or the faulty beliefs, as Aaron Beck would call them. They're very, very similar, and you can see that REBT formed the basis of CBT. When we look at these beliefs, it's no wonder we're kind of biologically programmed to have these kind of beliefs. So if you are walking around back in the day of cave people, and you walk up to this big black shimmering thing on the bush, and you start poking it, and it's a swarm of bees, and they start stinging you. You're learning a lesson. Life is teaching you a lesson in a very painful way, not to go and poke these things. Or a tiger walks past, and we learn that we need to run away from that. So we're experiencing danger in the world and learning from that, and going, forming beliefs of don't go near that, run away from that. But what happens in our modern day world is we're surrounded by things that are triggering those kind of thoughts and beliefs in us all the time. We're kind of, you can go on social media and you can be triggered. And it's the same function within the brain that is triggering when you're reading something on social media and they're telling you that you're a bad person, than in the real world when you're really in danger. And there's so much anxiety that can kind of be created by that. So we live really, if you think about it, in a very artificial world, a world that we weren't really built to live in. We've created the world around us, and our technology and our ability to build things has gone on such an upward, I guess, slope. And I'm trying to draw a picture of a graph here, on an upward graph, but what's inside us, our brain and our thought patterns and the way we feel and behave, are all the same as they were. We don't evolve at the same pace. And I think it's a really useful tool, CBT therapy, to be able to have someone who can sit with you to really look at the faulty beliefs and work through them. And it is, as you say, Rory, it has really good documented evidence that it is effective.
Absolutely. I love the counselling tutor takeaway. Don't poke bees with a stick.
No.
I think that's an essential takeaway for anybody. And I also think for those of you maybe doing your assignments, one thing you may want to consider is that CBT is an active directive therapy. So in other words, the therapist teaches the model to some extent of the theory, and then asks the client to go away and do some homework and look at some homework. So they're actively directing the therapy, as opposed to person-centered therapy, where it's non-directive. In other words, the therapist doesn't offer interventions or homework. So that, for those of you who are doing assignments, is a very big difference between CBT and person-centered therapy. And what's more, we've got a super handout for you. So if you go to counsellingtutor.com, go to the podcast tab on the webpage, go to podcast 189. That handout's waiting for you. Download, and it's a complete history, a potted history of CBT, and that's waiting for you now.
Yeah, if you are doing that assignment, go and get that. It's absolute gold. Well, there you have it. That's our student check-in. We now move on to our digital counselling revolution, where today we're going to be looking at selecting the correct equipment.
Digital counselling revolution.
Part of being an online therapist is making sure that you have the right equipment. Digital counselling really is a way of counselling people, but to do that you really need to use the same equipment. And as I'm looking across at Ken, we've both got headsets on, we've both got studio mics. We look like we may be in a recording studio, for a radio station, because of course we broadcast a podcast and the sound has to be crystal clear and technically good. The same kind of thinking has to be brought into play when you're thinking of working online, especially if you're doing video or working on the phone. And it's recommended that you invest in a good headset and maybe an external microphone, because the microphones that are built into computers tend to be a bit of an afterthought, and also they pick up sounds all around you. So if you can get a good microphone and a good headset, you can sometimes get headset mics, rather like pilots wear, with a boom mic. You're going to be able to hear the client better, and also the client is going to be able to hear you better. And also, I think, Ken, there's something around the comfort element. If you're struggling to hear somebody, if you're the client, you're going to really struggle. You may not be able to develop what we call that telepresence, which is the ability to really connect over an internet connection. It can be really tricky if you haven't got the correct sound equipment, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we run a certificate in online and telephone counselling training course through Counselling Tutor, and one of the questions that come up all the time is, what equipment should I be using? And for me, it's interesting. You've kind of delved into a little bit about the sound equipment there, Rory, and of course, when we're speaking about sound equipment, it's not just a functional nature that we use it for. It also has an ethical side to it, in that what we wouldn't want is to be meeting with a client and have what the client is saying coming through our speakers on our computer that could maybe be overheard in a different room or a different part of the home if you're working from home, or in a different office if you're working in an office type setting. So by having something that takes what the client is saying and puts it directly into your ears, you're cutting out the chance that could be overheard by somebody else. So there's that aspect to that. You want to be able to hear what the client is saying. You want the client to be able to hear what you are saying. So you do need clear sound. And as Rory pointed out, many laptops or devices that connect to the internet don't have the best microphones in them. They're tiny, tiny little microphones, and they pick up a very thin sound, and it picks up all the background noises, and it can feel very, very dirty. And if the client is struggling to hear what we're saying, if they're not able to hear the nuances of counselling, like if we use a non-verbal encourager or something like that, like you want the client to be able to hear those kind of things so they can hear and feel that you are connected. But at the same time, I think that there's going too far on this as well. So Rory kind of described what it looks like for us, and I'm looking at the same picture as Rory. We've got these massive big headphones on. We've got these massive microphones. Mine's got a big windshield on the front of it. Rory's has got a pop filter on the front of it. And I think when we're thinking about working with a client, what we wouldn't want to do is put more barriers in the way between us and the client. We already have the digital connection where we're not meeting in a room, in a face-to-face, same room situation. We are separated. We are meeting through the lens of the digital technology. And what we wouldn't want to do is start putting extra props in between us and the client. And I've been looking at this. I did a little bit of CBT on this. And it was suggesting that where you can, if you are using a microphone, if that microphone can be out of shot, it is better, because the client sees you as they would in a face-to-face situation, rather than you with a big microphone stuck in the picture. So if you are going to think of using an external microphone, maybe have a think of how that can be out of shot, or think about how that might be combined by how you listen to the client. For example, the headsets, just a regular headset that you plug into a phone usually has a microphone on it and the headset, and because the microphone is closer to your mouth, because it's the earphones are in, or the earpieces are in, the wire then goes down. There's usually a microphone that sits just under the throat area, so it's a lot closer, and it's better at picking up voice. And then of course there are wireless devices that you can use for that as well. AirPods made by Apple, absolutely fantastic. They are wireless. You pop them into your ears so you don't have any wires hanging down, and they have the microphone built in as well, and that also picks up sound pretty well. If you want to not have visible headphones, then musicians use in-ear monitors. And in-ear monitor is really just a headphone, but it doesn't stick out at all. It's meant to be flush so that when the musician is on stage and they're playing, they look cool and they don't look like they've got massive big headphones on. That would, again, be an interrupter and break the connection with the audience. So that's something else to have a think about. But I think at the end of the day, it's about what feels comfortable for you, what can kind of disappear when you're wearing it, when you're working with your client, so you're not kind of banging into the wire or aware of it, or it's not uncomfortable for you. Thinking of something that you can wear potentially for multiple hours if you are doing a number of sessions one after another, that is not going to cause you discomfort. Many products on the market. Have a look around, and of course, if you want to have the discussion about equipment, our Facebook group is a great place to do that. Just jump on Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor, pop in about what equipment you're thinking about, and believe me, there'll be lots of people that'll be very happy to join that conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. It just struck me as you were outlining the equipment, just how real and in the room that you felt. You know, it almost felt like we were sitting opposite each other, and that was down to the fact that Ken is using really good sound equipment, and it really does make a difference. And I'd also like to make a plea: if you are a phone counsellor, if you are using the phone primarily for counselling, why not think about getting yourself some kind of Bluetooth headset, so that you can leave the phone on the desk and you can listen in comfort. And I don't know about you, Ken, but as I'm speaking, I'm gesticulating. I'm a great mover of arms, and it's a bit more difficult to do that if you've got a phone, because you can't move your phone away from your ear because you might not be heard. So, you know, think about that. And also, I think there's a safety aspect. If you are using the phone, you know, having a good pair of earphones, I think it will protect your hearing. That's really important, because if you're using, you know, poor quality headphones, it might be that eventually, or ones that are over loud, you may very well damage your hearing. So sound, being able to speak and be able to hear the client, really are essential ingredients of a competent and effective online therapist.
Yeah. And then we can move on to vision. Once again, if you are doing video counseling, most laptops, most tablets don't have the greatest cameras in them. You might look to invest in an external webcam. There are many available, and they all pretty much do the trick. They all tend to be a bit better quality than the built-in cameras that come in a laptop or a computer or a desktop or whatever it may be. But I think one of the things that here again you can go overboard with the technology. One of the things you can look at doing is looking at how you can use what you have in a better way. So if you are just using the camera that is on your laptop or on your desktop or on your tablet, then think about where you position yourself so that you can be seen. And what I mean by that is, if you sit with a window or a bright light source behind you, what happens? The little tiny camera tries to compensate. It doesn't know which part is you and which part is the background. And its job, the camera's job, is to make the image that it sees balanced in terms of light. So if you have a bright light source behind you, it goes, oh, that's a bit bright. I'm going to make this a little darker. And what that can do is it can make you appear in silhouette, where you look dark, where you look shadowed, and you're not clear to the person that you'll be meeting with. Whereas if you reverse that and you are facing a window, or you're facing the brightest light source, and you have maybe just a wall behind you, then you will appear illuminated, you will appear brighter. So you can just use the technology you have and play around with that in different places to try and get the best out of it. And taking the same for sound as well. You know, if you are just going to use your in-computer sound or your laptop sound, you can do that if you take consideration of where you're going to meet. If you can meet in a room that is not noisy, that doesn't have echoes, that doesn't have background sounds, that if you're using a laptop or something that is on your desk, that you're not banging on the desk. Don't know if you can hear that sound there.
Oh, yes.
But it picks up the noises. The background noises. So you can use what you have if you consider. And if you're in what's called a live room is a room that just echoes a lot. when you speak, it just doesn't sound so good. What you can do is just hang clothes around, duvet covers, curtains, all of those things deaden sound. Having material around to absorb the sound within the room so that it doesn't echo back can improve the sound quality as well. I had a musician friend of mine from many, many years back, and whenever he was doing main vocals for one of his songs, which he used to make at his house on his own little recording device, he used to get into the cupboard, Rory, with all the coats and because it was all the clothing would absorb the sound, so it was very strange. He'd go into the cupboard, close the door, and it would be take one, and there he was singing away in the cupboard because it was acoustically dead. There was no reverberation, there was no bouncing of the sound, and he would be able to put the vocal tracks down just using very basic equipment and just manipulating the environment.
Absolutely, Ken, and while we're talking about webcams and seeing each other again, myself and Ken are seeing each other in real high definition, crystal clear clarity, and I think that if you have a clear webcam for yourself, so your client can see you in real high definition, it might, and this is just my thoughts. I've not seen any research on it. It may negate to some extent disinhibition effects because you are appearing more real, if that makes sense. So when you're being seen by the client, it's almost like you're sat in front of them. And of course, disinhibition effect is where people, they feel that they're not in a reality, that they're so distanced that they become disconnected from seeing the person and more into a kind of fantasy mindset. So I think there's some really good advantages of having a good or a best quality webcam, or indeed, as Ken has outlined, positioning your onboard webcam in a place where it gives you the best illumination so that the client can see you. I'm not seeing any research on that yet, but I would imagine that that somebody somewhere is researching it, Ken.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The quality of the picture and the quality of the sound linked to outcomes in counselling. It'll be an interesting research project. If anybody out there is interested, please share the results with us. We would love to know. A final thought on this. Again, it's about manipulating your environment, because we understand. I mean, the last thing you want to do is be shelling out thousands, and you literally can shell out thousands on sound equipment, on camera equipment. It's not necessary if you can manipulate your environment. And one of the easiest things to do is to use a desk lamp. Just a desk lamp. So picture in your mind, if you will, that you're working from a laptop. You open up your laptop, the camera's at the top of the laptop, you're using the onboard camera. First thing you would want to do is raise up the laptop so that the camera is at eye level. Maybe put it on some books in front of you so you're not looking down at the camera or looking up at the camera, that your eye is in line with the camera. And then use a desk lamp behind the laptop, peeking over the top, just where the camera is. Turn it on, and that will just put that little bit of illumination on your face. It will lift you. It'll make you pop from the background, and that can really, really improve the picture so much. And the truth is, you can actually get better results from a poorer camera that is used well than you can from an expensive camera that is used badly. Doesn't matter how much you paid for the camera, if you've got a big window behind you with massive light shining through, it's not going to be a good picture. So have a think about how you can manipulate your environment to make your lighting sound better if you're working online.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important part of teletherapy, and one I think that sometimes overlooked. And also, it gives you a professional, a professional gloss, so that I think a lot in therapy is about confidence in the therapist. And if you turn up to see a client, you're in silhouette, you can't see your face, or you're peeking over the screen because the camera isn't set properly, it's not going to bode well for the client's confidence in you. So we always say practice. Find a buddy, practice it, If you're doing, if you're working with a friend or a colleague, record it and have a look at the recording and see how it looks, see how it sounds. And it's all about CPD. It's all about developing your practice. Your online practice needs as much attention, I think, as your face-to-face.
Yeah, very much so. And if you're interested in doing some formal training on online and telephone counselling, we also cover email and text in our course. We offer a certificate in online and telephone counselling, and more information on that can be found at counsellingtutor.com. So there it is. That is our digital counselling revolution. We now go into what I've been really looking forward to in this episode. It is Practice Matters, because we're going to be learning how parents can help their children with mental health.
Yes, I was fortunate to catch up with Dr. Roseanne Kapana Hodge, who is based in Connecticut in the United States of America. Forbes magazine called Dr. Roseanne the leader in children's mental health. And I spoke to her and she shared some really useful tips on how parents can help their children gain better mental health. And, as a school counsellor for 7 years, one of the things I used to get asked a lot by parents was, how can I support my child within sessions? Well, in this interview, Dr. Rosanna really outlines how you can do it. And this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters.
So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Roseanne Kapana Hodge from the great United States of America, a colleague from the United States of America. And you're going to be talking today, Dr. Roseanne, about reversing mental health, what parents can do. And I'm fascinated by this topic because I'm sure a lot of parents will listen to this and think, what can we do? We're living in strange times. So what can parents do to support and reverse mental health difficulties in their children?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it's often surprising to parents that there's so much that they can actually do to help reduce and reverse mental health symptoms, because that's not the message that we're getting. So what I like to do is, really just start at the most basic levels and help parents to understand all those things that they can do to help with what really is the most important thing, and it's regulating the nervous system. So we're living, Rory, in very high stress times. We were already living in high stress times across the globe before the pandemic. And during this pandemic, people are feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, and really uncertain about what lies ahead, and not only for their children, but for themselves as parents. And so what I like to do is really teach parents the first part, which is regulating their nervous system. And the first step in that is breath work. And when we teach kids about how to breathe properly, and guess what? Most adults aren't breathing properly. It is an easy thing that anybody of any age, even really, really young kids like toddlers, can start to learn how to do. And why is that important? Because we're all having very hyper stress activated nervous systems. And when our nervous system, if for those of you that don't know about your nervous system, we have an autonomic nervous system regulates our stress response. And there's healthy stress responses and unhealthy stress responses. And a healthy nervous system, something's really stressful happens. Like you get in an argument with your teenager and your teenager tells you that they hate you, right? For any moms and dads who have teens, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so your nervous system activates, goes into the sympathetic dominant state. And if it's healthy, it goes back into this regulated parasympathetic state. And when we are constantly bombarded with stress, it doesn't have that same ability to go into a regulated state. And it's just constantly stressed. And I think this resonates with people because this is where a lot of people are at right now. And when you're in a sympathetic, stressed out, dominant state, everything irritates you. Noise, lights, you feel muscle tension, your eyes hurt, you have a hard time sleeping, you might have gastrointestinal belly aches and all types of things that are really interfering with your daily life. So when we practice breath work, we're able to help regulate. And I use a really simple protocol called the REPS protocol. It's 4 steps to getting your stress under control. And it starts with that breath work, which is respirate. Then it's envisioning, seeing yourself with successful solutions, then positivity, talking positively to yourself, which is probably the hardest things that parents do, and then stress management. So breath work is really easy and accessible. And then when we envision success, which guess what? People are really catastrophizers, and we often see the worst. So when we tell our brain that it's going to be successful, we see it, and then we say positive things to ourselves, our brain will believe it. And I liken this to a baseball player that goes up to bat. He doesn't go up to bat and say, I'm going to stink today. He says, I'm going to knock this out of the park. And you are much more likely to be capable because that's what you're telling yourself. So, and the last step is stress management. If you're not daily practicing breath work, biofeedback, yoga, prayer, meditation, journaling, there's lots of options. We've got to, especially during this time, get our nervous system to regulate, be in that parasympathetic state for ourselves as parents, for our kids, our teenagers. And it couldn't be more important than ever. And it just requires 10 minutes a day. It doesn't mean an hour a day. It's great if you have an hour a day for self-care, but it's not really realistic. So that's the first step in reversing and reducing those symptoms, because if your nervous system is stress activated, no learning can occur. And I can't say that enough. So if you're in a hyper stress activated state, your brain cannot process language, your frontal lobes don't work properly, and you cannot take action in the same way. So it can start with those simple techniques to help regulate the nervous system so that you can actually learn things and change behaviors. It's really, really critical for parents to understand that. And that's really such a simplistic way to really explain what happens to the brain and body under stress. And then really, how does it lead to emotional issues like anxiety, OCD, depression? It's chronic long-term stress, and kids are not immune from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are really, really pertinent things that you're saying. And one of the things that strikes me as a former school counsellor, I used to work in schools here in a school here in the UK, is that parents would always come to me and say, what can I do at home? How can I help my child? And I think that is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant tip. So, you know, if there are any school counsellors listening, and I'm guessing that it works for adults as well.
Oh, and, you know, I use the REPS protocol with schools when I go in and work with schools. I actually use the REPS protocol for organizations that hire me to work with their employees. I mean, to understand that there's 4 steps and to simplify it and that people can take action on those. And, you know, often we think of this massive big thing. And yes, people do big things with me. They do biofeedback, neurofeedback, psychotherapy. But when we start with this and we help to regulate their nervous system, people can do different things. And in this, right, we want kids to manage stress because we want them to have coping skills. And one of the biggest things that kids are missing that I've been doing and working with kids in a school, privately and as a consultant, is that kids are missing coping skills. They lack resilience. And it is one of the biggest contributing, if not to me, the biggest contributor to kids having such an increased level of mental health issues, which is why I formed the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health in January of 2020, right before the pandemic, because in this 30 years, I've seen kids not have these skills. And, you know, kids learn coping skills from their parents. And if parents are using the REPS protocol, they can regulate their nervous system and they can better respond, not perfectly, but in a more healthy way to the stressors that they face and we all face, and myself as a mom, every day. And when we do that, our kids get a better sense of how to cope. And, you know, our kids, nobody wants kids to be uncomfortable, but learning how to tolerate those uncomfortable emotions like grief, anger, sadness, whatever is going on is the key for kids to build those coping skills and develop resilience, that they can get through things like the pandemic, but they can also get through big things that happen in their life in the future. And that's so critical for mental health. It really is a stress inoculator. It's so neuroprotective to be able to look at stressors differently.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with you. And I'm picking up on the point that, parents would benefit from this because children learn from their parents. This has been known for ever, that, children look at their parents as the bigger people, both kind of spiritually, intellectually, and physically, and they draw down what they see and they build that into themselves. So it's a really useful, it seems like a very straightforward approach. That's what I like about it. Easily taught, easily got across, and a therapist could pick that up at the next session and say, how's that going?
Absolutely. And, you'll be able to get it on your page, but I have these free coping statements that parents and school professionals can use. There's over 100 of them. And when we, as school counselors or parents or anybody who's working with kids, shift our language slightly to help them be more comfortable taking an independent role in coping, it really can have a dramatic effect, a positive effect on a child's mental health. So, you grab the download and you can learn ways, whether a school counselor, these are things that I collected over 10 years as a therapist. So there's over 100 statements that are really helpful. And again, I want parents and professionals to realize, as they know, it's those little habits, it's the tiny habits that really create these big waves and changes in a positive way.
Well, I cannot say how grateful I am to have spoken with you today. I think the information that you've given is going to be really valuable. I'm sure that I can hear people writing those things down as we speak. And of course, we will make that handout, that download available on our webpage, along with all the other information to be able to, you can go to your organisation and see all the other things you do. So, Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me in this important conversation about kids' mental health.
Thank you to Dr. Rosanna. Thank you to you, Rory, for hosting that interview. And there you have it. That's been quite an interesting episode, Rory.
It has. It has been a really, really interesting episode. We started off with the history of CBT, went back to the Greeks, of course. In Digital Counselling Revolution, we outlined why it's really important to have the right equipment in terms of a microphone and webcam, all the knowledge to make the most of what you have in the service of your client. And then finally, we caught up with the fabulous Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge, and she shared such valuable information on how parents can support their children if they're going through a difficult time. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and hey, join the digital counselling revolution.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counseling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.